Mikael to introduce this concept and idea. Yeah, so this is so now I would like that we are thinking a little bit different on what we can do to move from here, because now we have had a conference with a lot of scientific presentations and findings, and this is a very good base for other things. But whatever we do, we need motivations to get funding, and we want to pursue our career opportunities in different ways. And now, when we have a basic research, with basic research, we need to motivate. What is the use of this research? How it will be used? We have the United Nations goals, 17 goals, which do fit for your research when you apply. So this comes more and more. We need to motivate. And also, from the university point of view, the academic track record is something. How many papers have you published? And which is the impact factor? And have you done any dissemination? These are the normal things. So when we apply, they look at those things. But now it's being a slow shift, very slow shift, that we actually get appreciated for doing some usefulness, these impact things. But it's still not credited that you get it in the fundings. But if we have this as a natural part of our research, that we do think about it, and most important that we have exchange about such things, so we can, if I have some experiences, I can tell you and you can tell my experiences, and I think, oh, maybe these two things I can use for my case when I want to move to the next level. Whatever that is, either it's innovation in your area, or like the universities would like to have more innovation, what can we do more for that, or to create a startup company or anything like that. In the beginning, when I started with these things, I didn't know anything. But then I came into a group of 4 researchers 10 years ago who were meeting every 3 months, and then we shared some things. And now we have matured, so all of us has 2 or 3 companies. So then and they are still not bankrupt, which is positive from the materials point of view. So now the idea is that in this session we will share some of the thinkings and ideas and what can we do to move ahead. So I will just give some introduction from my background, why I did it, so you feel more comfortable about this thinking. So now we should try to change the scientific brain to innovation brain. So I will show you one of my future things or the research. So can we, some of you are young researchers or still studying. Here's a young researcher. So maybe we can start to think more about the innovation and getting companies in order to have money for the research in different ways than the normal funding calls. In Sweden, we have basically 1 time per year we're applying for research fundings, and then we're working like crazy to apply for those, and then the percentage is maybe 10–15%, and then we get disappointed, and then we're disappointed for a year, and then we apply again to get fundings. But there are other ways how to get support to your research. Sometimes you can have industrial collaborations. In our field, we don't have such a type of industry. But also this way of innovation could be something which can push the research, but also give funding. Because innovation is more and more needed and appreciated. So that is what I would like to share. So if we're thinking a little bit more on other money, this is Japanese money, which I got after technology transfer. And this is my daughter. She got the money. Either my wife or my children, they get it. My background is materials research. So I did my PhD in the 90s, working with the growth of silicon carbide, and then I made my PhD thesis. Then I started to apply for projects, and I got rejected, applied, I got rejected. So after 8 years, I got my first research grant. But at that time, it was also more and more researchers came into the asking for fundings and so on. And I'm in the materials, so whatever I do and publish, it's very difficult to go into the high impact journals like Nature and so on, because we don't need device demonstrator in order to get such publication. So it was very difficult to get such publication so you can motivate the research. And at some point there came actually this guy. This is Satoshi Kamiyama from Meiju University. So he's one of the successors to Isamu Akasaki. And Isamu Akasaki got the Nobel Prize for the blue LED, together with 2 more researchers. So he comes from this group. But this guy had an idea. I would like to make a light-emitting diode from silicon carbide. So the silicon carbide emits light. It's an active material. But he was not very experienced in the growth. But he needed thick layers of these things. And my PhD was on growing silicon carbide, and one method was thick layers. At that time it was for power devices. And it failed ultimately because we could make thick layers, but they were not pure enough for the power devices. So the highlight of my PhD thesis was a method which was not useful after 4 years. But then came this guy, oh, I would like to have such thick layers, but I don't care about purity because I want to introduce elements so we get light out. So then I said, oh, Satoshi, I have a method for you. So then we started collaboration. And when we continued to do these things, it was decided that it could be a business. So then they said that we have 30 patents, you have 1 patent, let's make a joint venture. So then it became a Japanese company. So I was involved in technology transfer our method to Japan. And that's when we had this type of money. Some shares. So it was my first experience in, oh, someone thinks my research is useful for something more than papers. And at that time I was thinking, I like this. So then I decided that I would go to this path of entrepreneurial research instead of the traditional academic ones. Because also at some point you cannot go to the academic research and be responsible for a whole group and doing the administrative things and also do commercialization of companies if you want to do several. So one needs to choose the path. So I choose this dark path, entrepreneurial. So this was my first experience. And Satoshi is a really nice guy, and this is the most distinguished LED group in the world, so I'm very happy that I can collaborate on such level. I'm a simple guy from a small town in Sweden. And also in silicon carbide, when we grow the material, when we fail in the growth of silicon carbide, the material graphitizes because we heat up at high temperature. And material sublimes, and then you have a graphite layer on top, which is very embarrassing from growth point of view for silicon carbide applications. But then one professor from Chalmers said that, oh, this graphite, I would like to explore it, study it. And then they had a look at it, and it was very high quality of graphite. And then it was a couple of papers from that. That was year 2001. And then we were thinking, this is research, let's make this thinner. So 2005, we have 1 layer of graphite, or 1 carbon layer on silicon carbide. So that was graphene. So it was quite early, and we could control the graphene on that. So this is the graphene process of silicon carbide. And in research, we started to distribute samples like this, and we had more and more research collaborations, and we had some projects, but then we had to distribute more and more, so we could not do the projects. So we were thinking, how can we get rid of these who wants free samples? We asked them to pay. And we asked them, would you like to, we cannot do material for you because we have projects. Would you like to pay? Yes, they said. So then we started the company, made a startup from our research findings for graphene on silicon carbide material. So then my path even became more like this. And also then so that was some startup experience and some technology transfer experience, which was very nice. And then I become involved in the graphene. And in Europe, there's a big graphene flagship, and there's a roadmap. This is the roadmap of graphene flagship from 2013, from the material production to devices, and then it goes up here to system level. So I was involved in the Swedish graphene program because there was a national program, so I was in the board. And then when I was involved in that one, I needed to think in a bigger scale, so I made my input from research and startup, and there was ABB and other big companies involved in the board. So then I was sort of trained to think bigger picture. It was a very nice experience. And then also I have been participating in other things where there's technology transfer discussions on international level. So this is in China when it was discussed. So then my research brain started to change. So then I became more technologist, or thinking how can we make more usefulness of these things. And at the end, maybe we have some prototypes of material in the research. So there's a demonstration in the research, which potentially could be a product. But from this point to a real product which people want to pay for in volumes, this is a big step. And then I was also became involved. This is a regional guy in our region. So then in Europe, European Commission, they give money to the regions. Here, you should do more of these regional things so the region grows. And some years ago, they gave money, but there's not so much happening. You should do a little bit better, all you regions. So then they asked all regions, you should focus a little bit more on some areas where you're good. Do smart specialization. So that was launched maybe 5-6 years ago, and then you will get money. So now all regions need to specialize in areas where they are strong, so they make it a little bit more better, and then they get this European funding. So this guy is active with that. And one of the areas in our region is advanced materials. So then they asked me, could you help out here? So I was one of the experts. We were 4 experts in working together to support this guy for the regional. So we made some inputs. I became involved as an expert on material, and then we could supply. And then we proposed different things. And one of the things was an arena of material cluster. So if we want to boost this thing, the idea was that we have many stakeholders, but they are doing different things. But if we meet in a physical point, we can have interaction, and there are more new ideas, and there's more coupling between industry and academic and industry and SME. Unfortunately, these guys decided to build this whole park, aviation park, but it was already decided. And then we were asking, can't we have one of the buildings so we can make our arena? They said, oh yes, you can take it. So then there's a plan for that, and now one of the buildings will be an arena for materials. So then I started to learn about this regional growth thinking, how to do those things for my experience. But now I use these things to try to motivate how can my research area grow if I do something similar in my... So I use these motivations for my research, not only the technological or scientific things. So this is the, if you want to read about this, there's a big document from the European Commission about research and innovation strategies for smart specialization. So this has a nice name and so on, and it's a big document. The difficult thing is to implement this, because even though region talks about it, European Commission talks about it, most of the researchers and SMEs have never heard about this. But there's a big gap. But the big things take a long time. And there's one way how this was set up in our region, so one can use that as tool, maybe if it's suitable for an avenue or so. And then I was thinking, oh, these big things, they are useless because nothing really happens. They just talk. And then you cannot implement these strategies. But what is implemented in reality is when you have collaboration. So if I find collaboration partner, we make a good matching, then we start to collaborate together, and then we start to share things, like in my entrepreneurial group, which I was involved in. So maybe the innovators or people interested in this, they can support each other. So if we say, we should meet, then we can have interaction, and then we can support each other. And actually there's a model for this from healthcare. So if there's a patient and the system, there's a big gap, but then they form a group, a team here, who's supporting the patient. And this team works more or less independently, so they make decisions and so on. That was very good for this because the cost for the patient was reduced 40% or something like that. The life quality of the patient helped. So forming a team can be very beneficial to actually do something in real, so something real happens, so like a pilot type of projects. So now I'm thinking if we can do something similar like this, but in our avenue for the future. So this is called Burzog model in healthcare. So I did not get these ideas myself. It just comes, I read about this or I met some person. So now I'm sharing my experiences in this. And then if we use these things even further, so we have teams here, they have networks in different ways. And then you can have share, maybe this is less mature than this one, but if we're working together, both regions will grow. So we can take example, research groups, with this research group and this research group, they will support each other. If this has problem, this will support, and then it's opposite. So we form networks. So that's an idea which I proposed could be good for the regional growth. And also now when the smart specialization phase 1 goes to phase 2, and phase 2 is basically that regions should collaborate. Phase 1 was stronger regions, and now the regions should collaborate. So if we have such sharing, then it can also be good for the transnational progress in Europe. So these are things which European Commission is now looking for. So I use those words, hopefully they can hear me and I get fundings. And also at the European MRS Spring meeting, this is Professor Amano. So he was the second guy in this team who got the Nobel Prize for the Blue LED. So he was invited to talk about his experience and so on. And after this Nobel Prize, the people who invested, they came to him. Yes, this is very nice technology. White LEDs, big market and nice thing and so on. We would like to have more, but we would like to have it in less than 10 years. And he said, no, this is not possible. Yes, we would like to have it in less than 10 years. So now there is, he proposes different programs and so on to reduce the time. It will not be possible with 10 years for making a similar type of LED technology. If you compare the LED, the white LED, it was the blue LED, phosphor, but the basic research in materials was done in the 70s. Akasaki did the first findings and he got interested, he saw this material, then had Amano as a PhD student, and then they make this PM junction and all those things. So it was more than 30 years before the white LEDs became available for us like this. So if we have this type of ideas, it will take a long time. Whatever we do, it will take a long time before they are realized into a big market. So now he proposes such things, but also for Nobel Prize winners, it will take time. But and now coming back to why we are here and what can we do, because here we have been talking about the research things and nanotechnology and these NANOSMAT conferences which are now being organized. There's a big momentum, we have ideas, but if we would like to boost those things and our own things, we originate from the science, but we can take this step in innovation, but we don't know exactly how to do. So the idea here now today is that we have a little bit of discussion from what is your interest or what is the driving force at your place, so we just share some thoughts and maybe we can crystallize some ideas. Yes, here we can do some next step for doing something together or so on. Or just sharing experiences is useful because then maybe 1 to 4 or 5 years later on will have use of this, that someone told you, yeah, he did like that, and maybe I can use part of this. And I have some examples how we do it. With the graphene, for example, we did not buy equipment. We rented the research equipment. So every Monday we made material, and then we did not need to buy any equipment, which made a step to customer much shorter. So that was one of my personal experiences, how one can make a spin-off company and not need to have this investment barrier. So this was my introduction and my background, so I gave that as an example. So hopefully it's a useful example. So now I propose that we open the forum for discussion.